Under the glowing sunset stretching across the lush green meadows of Kintyre, Scotland, mist drifts lazily over the rolling hills, blending with the faint sound of waves breaking from McCartney's Bay. This serene landscape is High Park Farm, the secluded haven of music legend Paul McCartney, the man who once sent the entire world into a frenzy with the timeless melodies of the Beatles. But behind the seemingly endless spotlight lay a chain of scandals that shocked the world. Paul McCartney once admitted to being addicted to LSD during the Beatles' golden era and was repeatedly caught in trouble with the police for secretly hiding marijuana. At one point, Scottish authorities even discovered a greenhouse filled with cannabis inside his private farm, a staggering revelation that sent McCartney spiraling from the height of glory to the depths of disgrace. Now at 83, with the stage lights long faded, Paul McCartney, the wealthiest artist in the world, has chosen to retreat to his peaceful farm amid the misty lands of Kintyre. But what could have driven a music icon once standing at the summit of fame to abandon it all and live in solitude? And what truly happens inside High Park Farm, the mysterious sanctuary of Paul McCartney? Paul McCartney was born in 1942 in Liverpool, England. He is a legendary singer-songwriter and producer, best known as a member of the Beatles, the band that forever changed the course of popular music history. With his refined songwriting, soulful voice, and mastery of multiple instruments, McCartney helped create timeless hits such as Yesterday, Hey Jude, Let It Be, and Blackbird. After the Beatles disbanded, he went on to achieve further success with his band Wings, and as a solo artist, becoming one of the most influential and enduring musicians of all time. For more than 6 decades, Paul McCartney has been far more than a musician. He is a symbol of creativity, of love for music, and of the human capacity to reinvent oneself after every storm. Today, after more than 60 years at the peak of fame, Paul McCartney is no longer the lively young man from Liverpool of the 1960s, nor the glamorous Sir Paul beneath the stage lights. In his 80s, he has chosen a different rhythm, slower, quieter, and more meaningful. Far from the roaring crowds and dazzling concerts, McCartney has returned to nature, to his family, and to music in its simplest form. Amid the remote landscape of Kintyre, Scotland, hidden in mist and rolling fields, lies High Park Farm, the property McCartney bought in 1966 for around $35,000. At first, it was merely a financial investment, recommended by his advisor, a legal way to reduce taxes during the Beatles' peak earnings. But this 183-acre stretch of land with its sweeping meadows and wind-blown trees overlooking McCartney's Bay slowly became more than an asset. It became Paul McCartney's true sanctuary, a place where a legend could step away from the spotlight and live as an ordinary man surrounded by nature, memory, and music. The farm sits just outside the town of Campbeltown, facing the shimmering silver waters of McCartney's Bay, where the wind hums like a slow Beatles ballad. The house itself is humble, a 3-bedroom stone cottage built in the 19th century, with a tin roof, moss-covered walls, and a rugged simplicity. There are no tall fences, no iron gates, and no guards. Only open fields grazing sheep, a few cattle sheds, and an old wooden barn. Inside the decor remains rustic, worn wooden furniture, a wood-burning stove, a piano, a few family photographs, and a guitar resting in the corner of the living room. From the kitchen window, McCartney can look across the fields toward the valley and the distant silver-gray sea, a view both wild and serene, untouched by the glare of the stage lights. In his old stone cottage nestled in the Sussex countryside, England, the first rays of morning sunlight filter through vintage glass windows glinting off the Steinway piano he has played for decades. Paul sits there, his hair gray but still tousled like the Liverpool boy he once was, tapping his foot in rhythm as he plays a few familiar chords. On the table rests a cup of black tea, some slices of toast, and a small notebook he fondly calls my little mess of treasures, where he scribbles random lines that few can decipher. Sometimes a lyric for a new song, sometimes just the words "rainy day missing Abbey Road." Nancy, his third wife, often appears in the kitchen doorway wearing an apron printed with a smiling cow. They met when Paul was in his 60s, and their love unfolded gently like a simple melody. Nancy cooks. Paul washes the dishes, and sometimes he hums "My Love" while drying the silverware, making her laugh. He's still as romantic as that 25-year-old boy. Nancy once said in an interview he just forgets how many times he's sung that song already. On sunny days, they head to the garden where rows of tomatoes, kale, and strawberries grow, all planted by Paul himself. He has said that gardening gives him the same peace as songwriting. Both require patience and a little faith that something beautiful will bloom. At noon, when Nancy goes out shopping or to yoga, Paul quietly retreats to a small studio at the back of the garden, once a horse stable, now lined with guitars and black and white photos of Lennon, Harrison, and Ringo. He sits there, puts on his headphones, adjusts the microphone, and plays every instrument himself, just like in the old Beatles days. Some unreleased songs are saved on his hard drive labeled "For the Kids," meant as gifts of time for his children and grandchildren. His son James, also a musician, often visits with a bottle of red wine. They jam together, sometimes argue over chords, then burst into laughter like old friends. His granddaughter Bee rides her bike around the garden singing "Hey Jude" in her little lisping voice. Paul says that hearing her sing the wrong lyrics makes him feel that music is still alive, still growing. In the late afternoon, he and Nancy stroll around the small lake behind the house. Paul wears a knitted hat, holding Nancy's hand as he points to a spot in the distance where he once built a tiny wooden cabin, his hideaway from the world. There he reads, listens to classical music, and writes letters to friends. One of those letters was sent to Ringo, his lifelong bandmate. You know, he once wrote, "We're old now, but every time I hear your drums, I feel 25 again." At night, the house glows under soft yellow light. Nancy reads on the sofa while Paul sits by the window cradling his old Hufner bass, the one that carried him through thousands of performances. He strums quietly, humming tunes that have yet to be named. Sometimes he pauses, gazing out at the moonlit garden, and whispers to himself, "I'm still lucky, John." In that room, surrounded by the scent of tea and the warm resonance of wood, there is no longer a Beatles legend, only a gentle old man who loves music, loves life, and still finds joy in the smallest things: a perfect note, a blooming flower, or simply the touch of the woman he calls the last song of my life. And yet, behind that peace and soft yellow glow, his farm hides terrifying secrets. Specifically, in 1973, High Park Farm suddenly became the center of a scandal that shook the nation. The remote countryside retreat McCartney once called "my little piece of heaven" was raided by Scottish police, and in the greenhouse behind the garden, officers discovered more than 200 cannabis plants secretly cultivated. That number alone was enough to turn the incident into a headline across every major newspaper in Britain. When summoned, McCartney tried to defend himself, claiming he thought they were just hemp seeds used for weaving, but the clumsy explanation convinced no one. On the contrary, it only fueled public outrage, with many accusing him of mocking the law and betraying the model image of the British artist he once represented with pride. The Guardian ran a stern editorial titled "A Bitter Disappointment from the Icon of the 60s Generation." The Times wrote that McCartney has lost his sense of civic duty. and betrayed the trust of an entire generation of youth. Meanwhile, the press portrayed his Scottish paradise as a secret plantation where the rock legend grew the very plant that had destroyed his own reputation. And though he was fined only $100, the blow shattered the image of the peaceful, reflective artist, turning High Park Farm from a symbol of serenity into a national punchline. But behind the calm exterior and the image of a respectable artist, Paul McCartney endured a series of scandals and downfalls that astonished the world, particularly in the years following the Beatles' breakup, when he spiraled into a whirlpool of marijuana use controversy and personal mistakes that nearly drowned his legendary career. The story began on a summer night in 1964 when the Beatles stood at the pinnacle of fame and the world still believed they were the clean-cut gentlemen of England. During their tour in New York inside a suite at the Delmonico Hotel, a fateful encounter took place. Bob Dylan, the emblem of America's counterculture movement, pulled out a joint and offered it to the group. That seemingly harmless moment became a turning point, opening a completely new chapter in the Beatles' journey, where music, freedom, and taboo began to intertwine forever, changing how they saw the world and how the world saw them. Paul McCartney then, in his early 20s, didn't hide his curiosity. He later recalled that marijuana opened his mind like a new door, allowing music to flow more naturally than ever before. In the 1960s, an era when Britain was swept up in a storm of rebellion, freedom, and experimentation, psychedelics were not merely indulgence. They were seen as symbols of expanded consciousness. But for the Beatles, every small act was magnified on a global scale. What began as a casual experiment in a hotel room quickly transformed in the public eye, branding them as the vanguard of the stoned generation. And the once pristine image of Britain's perfect band began to crack for the first time. From the mid-1960s onward, McCartney became the center of a media storm. He boldly became the first member of the group to publicly admit to using LSD, the powerful hallucinogen that had taken the artistic world by storm. Under the glare of reporters' questions, he didn't flinch, calmly declaring that he had tried it a few times. The confession exploded like a bomb, sending shockwaves through the public. The conservative press condemned him as irresponsible, while the younger generation hailed him as a symbol of intellectual freedom. Though McCartney never descended into hedonism, British tabloids and police branded him the reckless hippie. Many songs from that period, such as Got to Get You Into My Life, were later revealed by McCartney himself to be a love song to marijuana. His honesty made him an easy target for both law enforcement and the press, especially at a time when the Beatles had become a national institution. In 1967, just months after the death of Brian Epstein, the sole manager of the Beatles, McCartney, and other members were arrested by Swedish police for carrying marijuana in their luggage, a harsh reminder that their every move was under scrutiny by both the public and authorities. 2 years later, in 1969, the nightmare continued when London police raided Paul and Linda Eastman's apartment in St. John's Wood and found a stash of cannabis cleverly hidden in the living room. Though he was fined only $200, the incident reignited public outrage and painted McCartney as the rebel Beatle, unafraid to break every rule. Throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, Paul McCartney seemed trapped in an endless cycle of marijuana-related scandals, a string of controversies that transformed him from Britain's model artist into a defiant outlaw in the public eye. In 1972, while touring with his band Wings in Los Angeles, police stopped his car and found a small amount of cannabis. McCartney and his wife Linda were jailed overnight and released only after paying a fine. Yet, instead of staying quiet or showing remorse, he quipped in front of the cameras, "If this is the worst crime in the world, then maybe they've never heard of rock and roll." The remark instantly ignited the media, reprinted across every major paper as proof of his arrogance and disregard for the law coming from a star once revered as a global icon. 3 years later, again in Los Angeles, he was arrested once more for drug possession. The British press, having lost all patience, collectively attacked him, calling McCartney a man who can never escape the shadow of his own guilt. They wrote that the musical genius once adored by millions was now destroying his legacy piece by piece, not through creative failure, but through recklessness and unbelievable carelessness. The peak of McCartney's long string of scandals came in 1980 when he was arrested at Narita Airport in Japan. Customs officers discovered nearly half a pound of marijuana in his luggage, an amount sufficient for criminal prosecution under international law. In that moment, the man once hailed as the embodiment of civilized England was handcuffed before flashing cameras and the chaotic shouts of police. McCartney was taken straight to Tokyo's detention center, where he spent 9 days in a cramped cell only a few square meters wide, sharing space with dozens of other inmates. The entire Asian tour was canceled, millions of dollars were lost, and the reputation he had built over 2 decades crumbled overnight. The image of Sir Paul, once the elegant symbol of British culture, appeared on the front pages of every major newspaper, but not with his familiar guitar. Instead, he was seen in a pale gray prison uniform, eyes hollow behind iron bars. The global media called it the most catastrophic fall in the history of modern music. In London, the BBC stopped broadcasting his songs. In Tokyo, local papers described him as an arrogant Westerner who dared to challenge Japan's laws. Even his most devoted fans began to question whether their idol was still the same man who had once embodied the Beatles' grace, intellect, and humanity. The Japan incident dealt a devastating blow to McCartney's image, yet it also marked a profound turning point in his life. After his release, he publicly vowed that he would never again touch drugs outside of England, a promise he has kept faithfully for decades. From that moment on, he began the long journey of self-reinvention, transforming from the lovable rebel of the 1960s into a family man, a mature artist, and a committed social advocate. After years of turbulence and the vow to leave his rebellious past behind, Paul McCartney finally found balance, a quieter, more peaceful life, but far from ordinary. For though he chose the simplicity of rural living, few people realize that behind his calm demeanor lies an empire of immense wealth, with collections of vintage cars, luxury yachts, and even a private jet, proof that the Beatles legend continues to live on the delicate boundary between modesty and magnificence. From his earliest days of success with the Beatles, McCartney treated cars as both passion and symbol. One of his first major purchases was an Aston Martin DB5, the car that epitomized British sophistication in the 1960s. He bought it brand new in 1964, the same year the Beatles released A Hard Day's Night. The car was a custom order, painted in silver birch, and fitted with a special audio system he personally selected. McCartney even requested a compact 45 RPM record player built into the dashboard, an almost unheard of feature at the time, so he could listen to music while traveling between gigs. His Aston Martin DB5 later became one of the most sought-after collector cars in the world. In 2017, it was auctioned by Bonhams for nearly $1.8 million. Among vintage car enthusiasts, McCartney's DB5 is celebrated as a rare fusion of pop culture heritage and classic British engineering. After the DB5 came the DB6, Aston Martin's next-generation model, introduced in 1965. With its improved aerodynamics, longer body, and more spacious interior, the DB6 suited McCartney's long drives between London and his Hyde Park farm estate. His DB6 was finished in dark blue with cream leather upholstery, reflecting his preference for understated elegance. By this time, McCartney had earned a reputation as a lover of classic sports cars who valued craftsmanship and design precision over raw speed. As the 1970s unfolded and his solo career along with his band Wings soared, McCartney broadened his automotive tastes. He owned a Mini Cooper S, the quintessential symbol of British pop culture, as well as a Land Rover Series 2 for use around his Scottish farm. By the late 1990s, he had transitioned to more eco-friendly models consistent with the vegetarian lifestyle and environmental philosophy he and Linda embraced. In recent decades, one of his regular choices has been the Lexus LS600HL, a luxury hybrid sedan combining gasoline and electric power. Praised for its smoothness and near-silent ride, McCartney once described it as perfect for someone who's heard enough noise for one lifetime. Beyond automobiles, McCartney has long been associated with private air travel. For years, international media reported that he frequently chartered or used a Gulfstream 4, a long-range business jet introduced in 1985, capable of flying about 4,200 nautical miles at cruising speeds near 850 km/h. Configured for 14 to 16 passengers, the aircraft's cabin offered separate work and rest areas, modern soundproofing, and onboard internet connectivity. Although McCartney has never confirmed official ownership, he has been repeatedly photographed boarding such jets between London, New York, and Los Angeles, the three cities most closely tied to his personal and professional life. In McCartney's case, private aviation has always been more practical than indulgent. His demanding recording and touring schedules require swift travel, yet he remains intensely private and avoids media exposure. A member of his team once revealed that McCartney flies only when absolutely necessary and always ensures his flights are carbon offset, a detail that perfectly encapsulates his lifelong pursuit of balance between comfort and environmental responsibility. Beyond cars and airplanes, McCartney has always shared a deep connection with the sea. In the 1990s, he owned a yacht named the Lady Linda, christened after his first wife. After Linda's passing in 1998, the vessel was renamed the Muse. Measuring roughly 47 meters, 155 feet in length, and valued at over $5 million, the yacht was designed in a minimalist style. Its light wood interiors paired with cream and white tones, creating an atmosphere of calm sophistication. The Muse featured 5 cabins accommodating up to 10 guests, along with separate living quarters for family members. The yacht's most remarkable feature was a small recording studio installed on the lower deck, allowing McCartney to capture musical ideas while out at sea. Though he rarely discussed it publicly, music journalists have reported that several of his 1990s demos were recorded aboard the vessel during Mediterranean voyages. Unlike many celebrities who use their yachts for lavish parties, McCartney treated the Muse as a family retreat. His trips often lasted weeks, stopping quietly at small harbors in France, Italy, and Greece. And perhaps on that silent ship adrift among endless waves, McCartney rediscovered the purest form of freedom, the same kind that awakened him in the Beatles era, when music was still an adventure, not a monument to fame. But behind these possessions lies an astonishing source of wealth that continues to amaze the world. Independent estimates place McCartney's net worth at around $1, $2 billion, making him one of the rare few to hold the title of music billionaire. Yet unlike most entertainment moguls who build fortunes through corporate ventures or commercial brands, McCartney's empire was built almost entirely from music through songwriting, performing, and publishing rights. His main income derives from the vast song catalog he co-wrote with John Lennon during the Beatles' years 1960 to 1970. Together they signed their names under more than 250 songs, many of which have become the very foundation of modern pop music. Although the publishing rights originally belonged to Northern Songs and later passed to ATV Music, McCartney continues to receive substantial royalties from performances and re-releases. Each year, the Lennon-McCartney catalog generates an estimated $50 to $100 million in royalties, depending on reissues, licensing in films, advertising, and streaming platforms. After the Beatles disbanded, McCartney founded MPL Communications, McCartney Productions Limited in 1971, one of the most strategic business moves of his entire career. Through MPL, McCartney began acquiring the publishing rights to hundreds of songs by other artists, including Buddy Holly, Carl Perkins, Jerry Herman, and numerous Broadway composers. Today, MPL's catalog encompasses over 25,000 works, making it one of the largest privately owned music publishing companies in the world. The company's estimated value now exceeds $600 million. Alongside publishing, McCartney's global concert tours have played a crucial role in maintaining a steady stream of income. Even in his 80s, he continues to perform in packed stadiums, drawing multi-generational audiences. Major tours such as Out There 2013-2015 and Got Back 2022-2025 have averaged around $4 million per show. According to Billboard Box Score, McCartney ranks among the top 10 highest-grossing live performers of all time, with cumulative tour revenues exceeding $1.5 billion since the start of his solo career. Beyond performing, McCartney also sustains significant revenue through licensing deals and projects tied to the Beatles' legacy. His collaborations with Apple Corps and major media companies such as Disney and Cirque du Soleil have produced globally successful ventures, including the Las Vegas stage show, Love, the acclaimed documentary series The Beatles Get Back 2021, and a wide range of official memorabilia. These projects have generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, while further cementing McCartney's role as both guardian and curator of the Beatles' legacy in the modern era. A considerable portion of McCartney's wealth also lies in real estate. He owns properties across the UK, the United States, and the Caribbean. In Britain, aside from his High Park farm in Kintyre, he maintains homes in London and Sussex. In the US, he owns an estate in Beverly Hills, an apartment in Manhattan, and a vacation property in the Hamptons. The total estimated value of his real estate holdings exceeds $100 million, though much of it remains private and closed to the public. Despite his immense fortune, McCartney is known for his financial prudence. He maintains a frugal lifestyle, avoids risky investments, and rarely makes ostentatious public displays of wealth. In numerous interviews, he has said that true wealth lies in the freedom to choose what you want to do, viewing financial independence as the cornerstone that has allowed him to retain complete creative control throughout his career. Alongside his business ventures, McCartney has also been deeply committed to philanthropy. He and his first wife, Linda, were early pioneers of the animal rights movement and strong advocates of the vegetarian lifestyle. Since 1999, after Linda's passing, McCartney has continued to oversee Linda McCartney Foods, a globally distributed vegetarian food brand that remains one of the most recognizable names in ethical eating. Beyond that, he has supported numerous charitable organizations focused on music education, disaster relief, and environmental protection, quietly donating millions over the years. Another cornerstone of the McCartney empire lies in the symbolic power of his name. The Paul McCartney brand represents not only music, but also endurance, reinvention, and continuity. The fact that younger generations continue to stream the Beatles' catalog ensures a long-term, stable revenue flow. A According to Spotify, McCartney's and the Beatles' songs still attract hundreds of millions of streams each month, a testament to the extraordinary vitality of a musical legacy created more than half a century ago. Overall, McCartney's wealth is not the product of luck, but the result of disciplined management and long-term vision. He is one of the few artists who successfully transformed creativity into a sustainable economic foundation while preserving the artistic integrity at its core. With more than 6 decades of continuous work, McCartney has proven that music is not only an art form, but also an industry, one that can be run with precision, discipline, and faith in the enduring power of melody. Behind the image of a global icon and vast fortune lies a Paul McCartney whose private life is complex and deeply human, yet consistent in its devotion to 3 constants: family, music, and simplicity. Over more than 60 years, his relationships have mirrored both the resilience and fragility of a man who has lived too long under the glare of the spotlight. Paul met Linda Eastman, an American photographer, in 1967 at an after-party for a concert. Linda had come to London to photograph musicians for a magazine, and their chance encounter soon blossomed into a relationship that would last 3 decades. They married in March 1969, just as the Beatles were fracturing. While most rock stars of that era were lost in a haze of excess and parties, McCartney chose domestic life. Linda became more than just his wife. She was his musical collaborator, a full member of Wings, and an active participant in the production of many of his solo albums. The McCartney family had 4 children: Heather, Linda's daughter from a previous marriage, whom Paul adopted, Mary, Stella, and James. All 4 grew up surrounded by music and art, though their parents carefully shielded them from the media. During the 1970s and 1980s, when McCartney was frequently on tour, the entire family traveled together, turning concert tours into bonding journeys rather than work obligations. This approach reflected McCartney's personal philosophy. If I can't be with my kids, then fame means nothing. In April 1998, Linda McCartney passed away from breast cancer at the age of 56. Her death marked one of the darkest periods in Paul's life. He withdrew from the public eye for several months, appearing only at memorial events. In later interviews, McCartney often said that Linda completely changed my perspective on life. She made me realize that fame is nothing compared to a quiet morning with the one you love. After her passing, he spent more time at Hyde Park Farm, the place she loved most, continuing their vegetarian lifestyle and the animal welfare work they had championed together. 4 years later, in 2002, McCartney married Heather Mills, a former model and social activist. The marriage drew intense media attention due to their nearly 30-year age difference and McCartney's global fame. They had one daughter, Beatrice, born in 2003. However, the relationship quickly deteriorated. In 2006, the couple officially separated, and by 2008, the High Court of England ruled that McCartney was to pay approximately $40 million in settlement, one of the most expensive divorces in entertainment history. The case was followed closely by the public, but McCartney chose silence. After the divorce, he stepped back from the media spotlight, focusing instead on songwriting and performing. Observers noted that this period demonstrated his remarkable composure and discipline in managing personal turmoil, a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding him. In 2011, McCartney married Nancy Shevell, an American businesswoman. The ceremony was held quietly at Marylebone Town Hall in London, the same location where he had wed Linda more than 40 years earlier. His relationship with Nancy has often been described as peaceful and balanced, as both lead a simple life and avoid publicity. Chevelle, a former board member of a major New York transportation company, frequently accompanies McCartney at international events, but rarely speaks to the press. Today at 80, Paul McCartney continues to perform and compose. His recent concerts combine modern technology with live orchestration, allowing audiences to relive the sound of the Beatles through a contemporary lens. Despite his age, McCartney rarely talks about getting old. In a 2023 interview, when asked about retirement, he simply replied, "I'll stop when I have nothing left to say through music." Paul McCartney's personal life in its entirety mirrors the journey of a man who lived at the very center of fame yet always sought balance. From the Liverpool boy who lost his mother young to the man standing before hundreds of thousands of fans, and finally to the quiet soul retreating to a misty farm for peace, every stage of his life has been bound by the same thread: music. Though he has achieved every conceivable artistic and material milestone, McCartney is remembered most not for his wealth or titles, but for his endurance. And that is the story of Sir Paul McCartney, a living legend who walked through the light, the excess, and the silence, only to rediscover himself along the way. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next stories about the timeless icons of Hollywood and world music.